Hello, everybody, and welcome to another episode of the Hardscape Growth Show. I'm your host, Alex from TechnoBlock, and today we have our first ever returning guest to the show. We have Matt from Hardscape Ottawa. In honor of this repeat episode or repeat appearance on the show, I am wearing a Hardscape Ottawa hat that I got from you at a contractor showcase quite a few years ago. Since then, we've got to know each other quite a bit. We talk a lot, and we were just kind of shooting the breeze a little bit a couple of weeks ago, exchanging DMs on Instagram, talking about some of the things that you're working on in your business, and we figured it might be time to do another episode. So welcome back to the show, Matt from Hardscape Ottawa.
Yeah, thanks so much for having me again here, Alex. And that hat is like an absolute collector's item at this point, too. There was 50 that went out. Probably 10 of them are destroyed by the sweat of my brow. Jordan, who works for me, went through quite a few of them, but there's the odd, nice condition one like that floating around. So yeah, keep that thing in good shape because it's tough to get a company to make them with so many little details that are on that hat. Right?
There you go.
A little side front. We've got the website on the inside of it, right? The patch with the phrase, and that's a really cool hat. I haven't been able to reproduce that in about 7 years. So,
well, next time I come rolling through Ottawa, I'm going to have to get you to sign it.
Jeez,
you got a pretty nice hat, too.
Yeah, not bad. Got it in the mail with a nice water bottle, too.
There you go.
Hardscaper.com here on the side.
There you go. The perks of participating in the things we do on Hardscaper.com. So, Matt, the last time we spoke to each other on the show was in February. You were actually episode 2 of this show. So February 5th is when that one came out for anyone who wants to go back and check it out. But at that time, we were talking about the importance of marketing for your business and what you do for marketing and, some things like how you rank as, almost always top 1, 2, 3 for all organic search rankings in the Ottawa Valley, so in the market that you cover. What you do on social media, how you kind of climb the rungs of hashtags to gain visibility for your business, how you target both audiences, homeowners and other professionals to really get more eyeballs on there and get the traction you need. And we were also talking about your website itself and how you had built up a cool little pre-qualification and lead generating tool, which is basically like a budgeting tool or an estimator for homeowners, right?
Yeah, that's it. We kind of present it as our instant estimate tool. Gives a pretty broad range, but the response to that has been incredible. I mean, we'll just be sitting here at basically any given moment, and there'll just be a ding, someone's done a response on this, checking it out, Especially Fridays, it really pops off like crazy in the afternoon. But at minimum 5 a day, I would say people punching that in, and then we've been pretty consistently booked with the virtual consultations that you book from that. Basically booked 2 months out since February, and at this stage booked 2 months from now as well too, to have a chat, the sort of initial consultation to see if we're a good fit to work together.
So you're averaging 5 leads from that tool a day on your website?
No, not necessarily leads. A lot of those people qualify themselves out, right? It's 5 people are doing that instant estimating tool, checking out the price.
So there's 5 prospects coming in, and it's filtering them for you.
Yeah, and there's over the course of this winter, whenever we get a little bit more free time, we're going to be refining that a little bit more too. A couple different changes to where it spits you out, depending on some of the answers that it gives you to help with that qualification process a little bit.
So you said that obviously you're getting a lot of traction on it, and today's episode is not about marketing, but I have to ask the question because you're doing this and very few people are, and obviously it's working for you. But how many of those 5 a day, how many of them turn into like a viable prospect for you?
Geez, it's tough to say. There's a lot of people that book the consultations that are maybe not quite viable prospects for us.
So there's another layer of qualification that you do afterward.
Yeah, exactly. The initial consultation is, in essence, scheduling a phone call with me where you get to see my face while we're doing it, right? So there's still some work to be done on that side of it as well. And, really breaking down how our process works to work with us, and, making sure that we're the right fit for the project, right? It's it's not to say that, you know, we're above anything. It's more that we're just not going to be competitively priced on certain projects based on our workforce, mobilization, and all of that,
Mm-hmm.
right? So it's yeah, we want to make sure that we're the right fit. But yeah, that's definitely some of that still happens through that initial consultation.
Okay. So again, we weren't prepared to talk about marketing, so it's all good if you don't have the exact performance stats, but say
it's
yeah.
sort of it's where the that refining that I was talking about is going to come in over the course of the winter time to kind of lessen even that much and really just that it's the qualified ones. I do sort of fear that being booked 2 months out in advance, maybe there is the odd right customer for me that gets scared away by that a little bit, right? So that's something that I kind of want to look at in advance, but there's more pressing issues in the middle of the season.
Well, what I like is this will be year 3 of tinkering with that tool that you've built. And, you know, that to me kind of speaks to your mindset about your business is it's the long term, the long game that you're playing. It's not set it and forget it. Like this works, great. We'll do something else and we'll just keep adding to it. You come back to the things that work and you make them better and you make them better and you make them better. And that ties into the subject of today's show, which is how do you make yourself better so that you build a better company for your team and for your customers. And one of the things that we were talking about, and it actually came up around this book, which we don't get any money for books yet, but right, but right now we don't. But this book called "Turn the Ship Around" by David Marquet. Why don't you tell us a little bit like how we got here?
Yeah, I mean, it's the book kind of covers a whole range of concepts about leadership that sort of, you know, I found out about it online, kind of read it and saw a video about the concept of it. And actually, a colleague of mine was the one that sort of put me on to that, another landscaper here in the city of Ottawa. Yeah, there's a number of concepts covered. The quick, simple versions of it is the kind of given 3 C's to your employees. It's competency, control, and confidence. So without one of those 3 C's, then the other ones will sort of lack. The other thing is this sort of like ladder of leadership, essentially, where, you know, if people are just sort of working in this land of do as you're told, there's a lot of room for harm there. The example that really kind of hammers it home in the book, the author of this book is a naval captain who was a captain of a submarine in the U.S. Navy. He was expecting to end up being the captain of this one boat and showed up and ended up being the captain of the lowest ranking boat in the entire Navy with you know, poor staff retention. No one's really getting promoted. It's just, it was not a good scene overall. And, you know, he kind of went about it with the traditional leadership tactics that maybe we'd be used to of, you know, I know everything and I'll be able to tell you exactly what to do to make this run perfectly. And it, you know, that feeds your ego pretty well, but it doesn't do a lot for the productivity and confidence of your employees, right? So he basically ended up in a situation where he was, you know, finding the guys were performing all right, but he wanted to put a little bit of stress on them and make an exercise a little bit more difficult. And he gave an order for the boat to do a function that it was just incapable of doing, essentially, or didn't have that button, that setting. And he gave the order, and his first mate gave the order back, and then the guy sitting at the throttle just kind of sat there and did nothing. And he couldn't understand, like, what the heck's going on here? And he says, well, why didn't you do this? And he says, well, there's no button for that. And then he says to the first mate, did you know there was no button? He says, yeah, of course. I'm really good at my job. I knew there was no button for that. Says, well, why did you tell him to do that? Well, you told me to do this. And that was actually sort of the thing that really resonated me with it, is that there was a lot of things where, you know, the intent was not understood of what the final goal was, what the task was met. And then if you say, like, why isn't this quite done the way that I expected it to be done? Well, you told me this, or you didn't tell me that. So if that sounds sort of familiar to anybody listening, this is the book to check out. And it gives this sort of ladder of how to increase the emotional maturity of yourself as a leader and the people who, you know, traditionally would be looked at as followers, but it also goes a lot into the concept of a leader type culture as opposed to a leader follower type culture, which is kind of where we all find ourselves in this situation. You know, that's the go-to.
So let's take a pause for let's take a pause from that part and let's back up a little bit to some of the challenges that you were having, or I mean, any business owner in the industry continues to have, but you were having particularly if my memory serves correctly, last year, which was hiring people to build the right team. You've kind of tinkered between, building your team from scratch, losing some people, having a lot of demand, being good at selling, being good at marketing. So you have the demand. You've tried the subcontractor route. You've come kind of back to having your own team. You do work with some subs, but you've come back to, you still need to have your own strong team. You looked inward and said, okay, like, what do I need to change to be able to build this team better? Because you had been hiring people, and what was happening?
It's I guess what was happening is that, and I want to know too, that we have a bit of a high turnover rate, but it's always generally that people just couldn't see the reason to why would I want to keep doing this, or they would never want to kind of accept the ownership that you're really looking for, that is like so tough to instill into people that, in that employee relationship. So that's basically what I think the biggest struggle was. It wasn't a lack of care or anything like that. It was just a lack of instilling ownership, really. And it's not a problem with every single person. It's problems with people that we're bringing in. They're just it's a job. That's not, that culture doesn't really work to be building the types of projects that we build, and to have the workplace that we want to work at. The senior people here at Hardscape Ottawa, we want to have a fun place to work, right? But it's not fun in that world of tell me what to do and I'll tell you what to do. So and I think that was sort of the big problem, is it's I'd be able to tell you exactly how to do every single little task that the person would do, but until they kind of take ownership of, look, it needs to end up like this, it's never going to be done the way that you want it to be as the owner.
So it was going through this process of hiring people that showed good promise, good potential, and it not working out in the end because they were never able to take that next step to really truly understand what they're doing, why they're doing it, and like you said, taking ownership of those tasks that if I'm going to be laying the base course of this wall, it's going to be perfect because I'm doing it, not because my boss is telling me.
Yeah, and it can even be broken down into sort of smaller tasks. Not to throw anybody under the bus, but I can give some specific examples. We have a patio in place. We're going to be running some lighting up into some plants that are around the patio, and we say, okay, here, we need to get this wire ran. The intent of it at the end is that we're going to have this wire. It's going to be laid pretty flat so that we can just put some mulch on top of it, hide it really nicely, and get that over to the couple lights that are going to the places. So we say to the employee, okay, it's time to go run this wire around the patio. Okay, we leave him to it. He comes back a few moments later, all done. Perfect. We go back, and there's just a wire kind of just strewn across the perimeter of the patio with no attempt to do anything, right? But if we were to say, hey, why did you do this? What was your thinking here? Well, you told me to run it around the patio, right? And well, why didn't you think of this? Well, you didn't tell me that. Another example would be where there was some river stone that had been installed by the client at their home that ran down the side of the house. But again, we needed to run a landscape wire. It seems to be maybe a point of contention for a while there. But we had to run another landscape wire from the backyard to get lighting up to the front to work with their entire system. And underneath that river stone, there was some stone dust over top of the cloth, the weed cloth. If you're landscaping, that's maybe not the best idea. But, we say, okay, labor, go move the rocks there. We need to get them out of the way. Not, we're going to run a wire here. It needs to look very nice and pretty at the end, right? So go get those out of the way. Come back, and it is just a jumbled disaster of stone dust and river stone that you're never going to be able to make look nice again without hauling it all out again, right? So, and again, well, hey, if you go to that, well, what happened here? Why is this like this? Well, you didn't tell me not to mix the stuff together. So it gets very frustrating hearing that it's always your fault whenever other people are not kind of putting their thought into it, right? So that's sort of where and the reason that I heard about this book that we're talking about here in the first place is basically same conversation with another colleague of look, this is what's going on. And he was like, sounds like you need to read this. And sure enough, yeah, some
So
fantastic
there's a
solutions
couple
for it.
things there. One being you talked about the challenges you're having with other members of the team, and that's where the suggestion for the book came up. So I think that's cool too. That as the owner of the company, you still show enough vulnerability with your team that you can say like, look, we're having a problem here. Does anybody know what we should do? Does anybody have any ideas? And someone can say, well, you know what, we should probably read this book because it sounds a lot like the problem that I read about when I read the book. So that's one cool thing is having those conversations with people. That's what makes a stronger team because you have different perspectives, different experiences, different skills too. But the other thing is you're giving some pretty good examples of, and we can all imagine a million scenarios. Anybody who's in any similar position where you told someone to do something and you're like, what the, why did you do it like that? Well, that's what you told me to do. And then you get upset with that person. You're like, well, man, like, what's wrong with you? Like, you don't get it? Like, what? And then you it starts to undermine the confidence and the credibility that this person has in your eyes. And the person that you hired that seems to be like, thought would be a great fit, after a few weeks, a few months, you're like, man, this guy doesn't know anything. What the hell? And it's you, the problem.
Well, something that really resonated with me from one of your most recent episodes of this podcast is whenever you said, if you take that shovel and shove the guy out of the way, you're not leaving yourself at square one doing that shoveling yourself. You're putting yourself so far back that you'll have to do it twice. You're putting yourself back that one step further than square one if you erode that confidence in your employees.
That's it. Yeah, that was from that episode, the lessons in patience. I was trying to do something different, but that's exactly it. It's you end up undermining your credibility as a leader, as a business owner, as the boss, as whatever title you want to say. But as a leader, you are demonstrating weakness in character and in patience and ability to lead. And at the same time, you're eroding the confidence of the person that you were asking to do the thing, and the rest of the team too. Now the rest of the team is walking on eggshells because the next time you ask them to do something, they better not mess it up. Otherwise, you're gonna lace into them next. So to avoid all that, you mentioned two things. You mentioned the 3 C's, and you mentioned the ladder of leadership. So why don't we break down your understanding of it and how you applied it, so that others who may not have read the book yet can at least take something away from this episode that they could apply right away.
Sure. So that ladder of leadership, it's basically a number of rungs, same as a lot of things, it seems. But the rungs are essentially describing the emotional maturity of you as the leader on one side of it, and then the employee, which, by the way, I want to start calling everybody just hardscapers, and really, give the value of that word. That's one thing that I've kind of wanted to change a little bit, is these guys aren't workers, they're not employees, we're all hardscapers, right? And there's a lot of value in that, and ownership of it. Hey, what do you do for work? I'm a hardscaper, right? The people that are accountants, they don't say, oh, I work in accounting, or I do accounting work. They say I'm an accountant. So why can't we all be hardscapers? Anyhow,
that's true. There are different roles. Accounting's good. I know you and I are both hockey fans, but all the players on the team, they're all hockey players. There's a first line center who's super critical to the success of the team in terms of driving offense, but that doesn't necessarily make him more important in a team environment than the seventh defenseman who plays every couple of games, or the backup goalie. These are just different positions, but they're all hockey players. And they all have a different role to play to support the success of the team. It's the same thing in business. It's the same thing as hardscapers. So I love that sentiment.
Yeah, absolutely. But so this ladder of leadership, it's basically that the very bottom rung of this ladder is exactly the world that I've been describing. I'm going to tell you what to do as the leader, and tell me what to do as the follower in this example. And our goal is to get these people up to the point where they're not followers down here, they're leaders up here. So the system is essentially, if you're presented with a follower saying, tell me what to do, to kind of give them and make them step back a little bit, take a little bit of ownership of like, what the heck is going on around me? You follow up with, well, what do you see that could be done right now? Or something of the like, right? And it becomes pretty automatic once you work with this for a little bit too. So then they'll say something along the lines of, oh, I see that, maybe the street needs to be swept, something like that. And you'll say, okay, well, what do you think we should do about that? Well, I think we should sweep the street. And you'll say, okay, well, do you intend to sweep the street? And they'll say, yes, I intend to sweep the street. And that's a perfect place to get to people. That's about where you want to bring most people up to, as a kind of main goal, to get them that point in the rungs of that ladder. It goes on into a few more levels of it where people really take on their own autonomy, and they end up in that leader section of it where it's they not only are they intend to do it, they say, I'm going to do this right now. This is what I'm doing. And then it'll get eventually to this is what I'm doing right now, because they're already in the middle of it. They've already flown ahead. And then this is what I've done. And your job as the leader of everything becomes a whole heck of a lot easier if you can progress everybody up to that level of maturity with their how they take on their work every day.
So basically, this ladder is to gradually build your team from followers into leaders in their own respect. That doesn't mean leaders, it doesn't mean turning them into people who then want to leave and lead their own team or want to start their own company or things like that. It means that they're more autonomous and more aligned with the goals, the objectives, the values of the company and the project and the team. Is that fair to say?
Yeah, no, absolutely. And if they wanted to go start off on their own, they'd be very well equipped to do so with all of those skills too. But it's but
that's not really the desired byproduct, right? Because I have spoken to a few different people, not just contractors, just different people who have this fear in them that if I invest in my people, if I build them up to X level, that they're going to become so strong and so confident that they're going to want to go off on their own and I'm going to lose them. So I'm better to have them weaker because then I control them. And that's a fear mindset. That's a scarcity mindset. And that breeds a negative team atmosphere, a negative team culture where you end up always being in that position where you always have to tell them what to do because they don't know. It's not because they're dumb. You just never showed them.
Yeah, no, absolutely. I think that it's, the whole thing with everybody, like, it's kind of a cliche thing that tons of people have quoted before, but like, what happens if you don't train them, right? Or what happens if you don't give them that autonomy? It's, that's far scarier than, someone going and being successful around their own. That's, that's something to be applauded, not necessarily something to be scared of,
Yeah. So let's come back to this ladder. So it starts at the bottom. This tell me what to do is basically what the follower is saying. So this is what the fellow hardscaper on the site is going to be saying when they're not initiated to this process. And it's important that you as a leader are intentional with this and are clear with the questions that you ask from that point. So they say, what do I do now? The next step for you, instead of telling them go do this, is, well, what do you think we should do next? Is that right?
Sorry, what the next step would be, what do you see? And that's
what
where
do you see? Okay.
Step back, take a look around. What's going on here? How can you fill in somehow?
Okay.
So the next step.
So you're zooming them out of that immediate moment where, like, I just put down the first course of block, let's say, or we'll take your example. I just put down that low voltage wiring like you asked me to, right? The thing you're asking them is, well, what do you see? And then from there, once they see a couple things, they start pointing them out. Like, I don't know, like, there's mulch there's bags of mulch over there, or there's a pile of mulch in the driveway that we're gonna have to bring around back at some point to cover up this wiring. There's the connectors to attach the fixtures, so we're gonna have to do that at some point. Do you want me to do that? we're role playing right now. Like, is that kind of what happens? It's like they'll start pointing things like, should I do that? Should I do this? You want me to do that?
So if they're pointing at this, my next step is going to say, well, which one do you think would be the best suited to your skill set and best suited to getting the project finished at this stage?
Okay.
So the next, it's basically the first part of the question being, what do you see? What do you think? What do you intend? Working your way up, followed by whatever is not robotic to actually be like, what are we dealing with right now, right? To really actually be coaching for that moment, just not generically coaching everything, right?
Yeah.
Yeah, so if someone were to say, oh, I see that the mulch is over here, I see that these connections over here, I may say, well, what do you think we should do first on that? Do you think we should do the mulch first, or should we do those connections? And then they'll say, oh, well, whatever, I think that we should do the mulch. And like, okay, well, why do you think that? Or, I think we should do the connections first. Well, why do you think that? And that's sort of a point where you can coach them through a little bit. And it's like, well, we should probably do those connections first because we're going to have to dig through the mulch to get at those connections later on, right? So, but you don't necessarily want to give them that answer. But you want to kind of, well, what do you think, right? And it's empowering to be given a chance to think about what's going on, too, instead of just running around like a chicken with your head cut off, hoping to do the right thing,
That's it. So let's talk about some of those intangibles that you're referring to, and you're saying it's empowering. What are some of the impacts that you've seen since learning this and applying it?
To be honest, one of our laborers that's with us right now, he's been with us the last few months, whether he knows it or not that we've been doing this to him. He's actually like the best performing, best cares about what the heck is going on, trying to find what to jump in on at least, and really enthusiastic about being a part of the team. Way more so than we've seen from any other employees for the past kind of run for a while there. This is all relatively new to me as well, right? So it's,
for sure,
it's something we're talking about. We're discussing new ideas here, and that's sort of what helps formulate how those ideas work for us. But it's definitely seen some improvements, seen a little bit less frustration out of the foreman who's been implementing some of these techniques as well.
Okay, so he's been doing it too. Did you teach him that, or is
100%.
Yeah?
And I coach him on it all the time as well.
Okay, because I know that like myself, I tend to answer questions with questions a lot, regardless, because I wanna know if what I think we should do next is actually what we should do. So I want to get the other opinions before I weigh in on it. But I also know that in more pressure situations, like the more, we're squeezed for time, or we have to deliver this, or things are going wrong or whatever, the more you kind of want to default to just go do that right now. Like, oh no, but we're late. The truck's coming. Okay, you do this, you do this, you do this. Do you catch yourself falling kind of backwards in that sense? Or do you find your foreman or other members of your team, how do you make sure that you get this actually rolling and it doesn't become a thing that you do once in a while?
Yeah, it's actually really tough to fall back into it, and it's always on the little small things. Like, hey, do you want me to put this in your truck? Is it right to yeah, just put it in the truck. Well, there goes the lost coaching opportunity in a sense, right?
But I like the way you just said that though. It's a coaching opportunity. So if you're looking at it through that lens, that they're coaching opportunities all the time instead of questions to answer, then maybe that's part of the key to keeping that mindset more open to that.
Yeah, absolutely. The way that I kind of look at it in the sense of maybe not so applicable to the pressure situation. I'm not exactly sold that there's any such thing as a landscape emergency.
Okay.
But, basically the way that I kind of put it to my top guys is look, if you have this guy doing something and it's going a lot slower than you'd like it to be going, or, they're not doing it the way that you want to see it, you kind of have two options. You can either kind of, take over from there, do it yourself. It was still slow because someone was working on it, and then now you had to work on it too. Or step back, use that as that, again, coaching moment, really make sure that they get a grasp of how to complete that. And then hopefully the next time that you're doing that task, they can do it themselves, right? So it's basically no matter what, in that moment, whatever you're trying to do, it's going to go slow, whether you choose option A or you choose option B, which one's going to put you in a better place next week, right?
Yeah. And that's coming back to what we were talking about at the beginning of the show, that long-term vision that you have for your company. It's not get the job done, make it the most profitable today. It's build the business for success for the future. All these other things fall into place when you're just you have kind of that guiding light and you know where you're going. Have you had feedback
Yeah,
from your
absolutely.
your team members? Like, you've seen the improvements, you've seen the change in people. Have they given you feedback?
Yeah, as I said, Jordan, who's the foreman, he's really liking this new guy quite a bit too. So he's singing his praises,
That's good.
absolutely. And it's I don't know whether he realizes it or not that it's what we're doing here that's putting it together. Or maybe it is or it isn't that, but it's I'm hoping that it is, and I'm hoping that yeah, it continues to see
Well, it's that
rewards.
positive reinforcement too, right? If it's working and people are happy and it's enjoyable and you're seeing the results, well, you're gonna. But a key, just from my experience, is make sure you're talking about it too, right? Make sure you're having the conversations, like especially with your foreman, but with the rest of the team as well, about how you're trying to do this, and these are the improvements that you've seen. But getting that feedback from them, you're talking about that ownership, and you want them all to become better leaders. That two-way conversation is critical to that. That's my
Oh yeah,
unsolicited
absolutely.
advice to you right now. But that's what I would do if I
Yeah.
were in your shoes.
Oh yeah, 100%. It's always an ongoing conversation, and learning along the way myself as well is a big part of that. To see what works, what doesn't, because it's essentially there's got to work through, like, the businesses will always have a next
Mm-hmm.
problem, right? The first is, oh, how do I get the work? How do I make the money? How do I get the guys? How do I do this? How do I do that? And eventually, kind of, I found you end up at this one where it's like, you start looking at, like, what does the culture really mean, and it's not necessarily like barbecues with the boys on Fridays. It's a lot more of, like, what is the whole, like, work
Mm-hmm.
culture of what happens while everybody's there. And if it's just sort of people standing around scratching their butts waiting to be told what to do, it's not a fun place. It's not the sort of thing that you want customers looking out the window at. It's whereas if everybody kind of knows their role to fill in, is always looking for the next step that they can be taking and buzzing
Mm-hmm.
around like little bees, it's a pretty
Absolutely,
impressive
and I
show,
think
right?
that speaks a lot to the value of the company too. You know, there is a philosophy on business. So, like, you start a company to one day sell it. If the company lives and dies with every order that you bark out, you don't have a company. You have you, and you can't sell
Yeah.
yourself.
Yeah.
So having a team of people that know what to do next all the time and are asking themselves those questions puts the company in a better shape for that eventual sale too, because it has more value. It has people and systems and other assets like equipment and property and things like that. But the most important part, all those other things are there. I mean, the property is an appreciating value. Everything else is a depreciating asset. So the only real value of a business is the systems and the people. And if you build good systems because you have good people, and you build good people because you're focused on these types of things, then you're setting yourself up for real success.
Mm-hmm. And I think it's the sort of thing too where you really need help building those systems. It's not a one person job to create those
No,
systems in
no,
a
you
business.
need
It
the involvement of
needs to
everyone.
be what works
That's
for
it.
everybody.
They're the ones that execute the
100%.
systems, so they have to have a say in
Yep.
it for sure.
Mm-hmm.
You mentioned learning a few times, and like I said at the beginning, you have a bunch of books. In fact, this whole episode here started because you sent me a picture of your bookshelf, which sits above your
Yeah.
video game shelf. But we'll talk about the full collection,
Yeah.
the multiple decades worth of NHL games at a later time. But in terms of the books, we hit Turn the Ship Around. We talked about the importance of that. What are a couple of your favorites, the standouts that you have that have made a lasting impact on you and your company?
Oh, geez. I mean, one that I've talked about on other podcasts too is "Profit First for Contractors" by Sean Van Dyke. That one is like a
Mm-hmm.
must read.
Mm-hmm.
It's tons of guys will swear by that one. It really kind of gives you a different mindset how you look at the financials of your company, right? And it's making sure
Yep.
that you're actually getting paid, because that's important.
Yep.
Um,
I mean, that's kind of a big part. Yeah.
some other ones. Geez, I almost need to go take a look at the bookshelf. My Haynes manual, Camaro, 1970 to 1981.
I
I've
was
spent
going to
a lot
ask
of
you
time
about
in that
that
book.
one.
The pumpkin plan was a pretty good one. Just kind of talking about making sure that you're putting your resources into the people that are going to be the right fit for who's your client in your business. That's a pretty good read. The EMyth, that's an interesting one that really breaks down sort of
Yep.
what you touched on.
Yep.
If you're just marking orders at people and that's your company, there's not much in the way of a company there, right? So
It's not really a pretty cover,
yeah.
but it's this one here. I'm trying to get the light right. There you go. So Gerber is the author. This is his last name. That's the EMyth. This one is the EMyth for landscape contractor. Is that the one you read, or just the
I haven't
EMyth
gotten
in
into that
general?
one yet, though I've meant to. I'm sure there's
Okay.
some stories I can relate to in there. So
Yeah.
yeah. But
That one, what for those of the audience not familiar with the EMyth, well, what matters in that one? Why are you recommending that one?
yeah, essentially it's just a breakdown of sort of the entire, like, most of us that start landscape companies, we don't have business degrees. We have, sore hands from laying bricks. So we go into it and think, oh, I'm going to go work for myself. And, we might be the best technician at what we do, which is a term that comes up in that book quite a bit, the best landscape builder. But that does not equate to having the best business by any means, right? And there's a lot of other stuff that people are sort of fooling themselves into thinking that they're entrepreneurs whenever they really just have like this job that absolutely consumes your life. You end up working for less pay for an absolutely insane boss that makes you work 80 hours, sort of thing. So it's
Yeah.
I worked for that guy for a couple of years, and it's not.
There you go. So that book is really identifying kind of the different roles that you need to play, or that you need to have on your team. You need to play too, especially when you're getting started, but you can't always default to your natural position, which may be the one that got you started. Like you said, the technician, which is, I have the skills, I know how to build it, but if you're not working on the other parts of a successful business, you just have a job.
Yeah, and
You're working for yourself, but it's just a job.
it's only a few years down the road into it, in my experience, that it becomes like you can't do both jobs anymore. It's actually impossible to be able to be like dealing with the clients and the designs and et cetera and et cetera and et cetera. And you really need to kind of pick a fork, like which of these jobs am I going to maintain? Which hats do I need to pass to other people? Is it and generally, the whole reason that most people started the business was that they wanted to pass that building hat, right, and move on to the. They enjoyed the other stuff. If you want to just build the stuff, it's a lot easier to not have to like deal with the clients and deal with the ordering and blah blah blah. All those things are like time consuming and stressful. So it's as I said, you have to kind of pass those hats off. It's kind of tough to be a very sunny and charming personality with the clients whenever you've been sweating for 14 hours that day, right?
Yeah, that's true. What are the hats that you decided to keep wearing versus the ones that you've handed off?
So all the sales is I take care of all that still at this point. That scene kind of looks to me like it will actually be the toughest hat to ever pass off in this business. Is kind of the way I'm looking at it right now. But
Why do you say that?
just because I feel that it's a lot of it is while I have the backup of I've built this stuff for 15 years, but also I have a very strong handle of how structure of sales and dealing with objections and et cetera. I have a background in that before I ever landscaped. I did a door-to-door sales job getting people to sponsor kids in third world countries. So I would essentially show up at a person's door and be like, hey, can I have $30 a month for a feeling? And that's not exactly an easy sell, but now
I mean, you could argue it depends how philosophical we want to get, but ultimately, most of what people sell is just feelings.
Of course,
A beautiful house, a fancy sports car, a vacation, a watch, even the clothes that you wear. These are all feelings. So that's
and I guess the one that what I see different about is that there is at least the tangible thing beside it. Most of those purchases that you mentioned, whereas this is strictly you're going to get a picture and a warm fuzzy feeling in your heart that maybe 20% of your donation is going to help a child in an impoverished country, right?
Yeah.
So that's sort of the ugly side of that, is not all that money actually goes to those kids, which is why it
Well,
didn't last
no.
long enough.
Well, I mean,
But my heart
yeah,
wasn't quite in it.
that's a whole other thing.
But yeah, no, so it's, basically we were like hammered sales techniques into our heads in that job. Most of which, especially all of the pressure things, are things I've abandoned. But really just having an understanding of how that whole process works and how that all works. It's, I'm very good at selling stuff, very good at selling my passion and the vision.
Hmm.
And to then have the technical background to back that up, it's sort of
Hmm.
tough to find someone that has
The
that
combination.
that skill set
Yeah.
together, right?
So that's something that you feel that you do better than most people that you meet, that you could hire. It's something that you not only are you good at, but you seem to enjoy doing it. Like just just listening to your voice and just the way you get a little more excited when you're talking about that part. So that's a hat that you kept. What are some of the other hats that you still wear?
So I still do the estimating,
Okay.
which is something that I'm trying to systemize a little bit more to make it a little simpler and maybe take off my plate a little bit.
Okay.
And then the general manager is still sort of the biggest hat that I feel I wear most days. Still wearing the sort of project manager hat a little bit, but sharing the duties a bit. But yeah, trying to kind of set all those up even more solid in the not so distant future.
So what have you officially handed off in full, and why?
Designs.
Okay.
That's off my plate at this point. I still have some say in them and still consult on what the design is going to look like. And then obviously I have a hand in that because I'm doing the consultation
You're
with the
you're you're
clients. I'm the
facing the
one
client, yeah.
exactly. So I'm sort of liaising between that. The basically any and all of the sort of accounting and payroll stuff that's out of my hands at this point. And then the majority of the on-site stuff, but that's not to say that I don't still get my hands dirty and go help the boys out a couple of days a week, sort of thing. I still enjoy that stuff too. It's just that I watch the seconds tick away of all the other things I'm supposed to be doing, not getting done while I'm doing that sometimes. So yeah, but yeah, the so most of the labor, most of the driving, the accounting stuff, the design stuff, that's all sort of off my plate, and I take care of the rest.
Okay. So the things that are they're not necessarily simpler to execute, but they don't necessarily tie into like what the core of the brand is, so to speak. Like it's like when people interact with Hardscape Ottawa, they're interacting with you. And you're the general manager of the business, and that becomes important in terms of determining the budget and how that gets spent and what the objectives are for the company moving forward. But the other things that are kind of more interchangeable, I don't want to say interchangeable. I'm not sure exactly how to say this, but like the construction side, construction remains construction. There are set procedures and methods and tools and techniques that get used and materials and all that. That's kind of dictated. So there's an execution aspect to it. Accounting, there's accounting principles. Like it's just you just follow the rules and make sure the formulas in your Excel sheets work properly. And I know it's more complicated than that, but there's still it's very set in advance. The logistics component, even the project management, like you said, you do a little bit of it because you're still dealing with the customers, so you still got to manage the calendars and their expectations and everything. But most of it is pretty much it has a process, it has a system, it's following it, so I can hand that off. Is that something that was intentional, or is that something that we're just kind of discovering now as we're talking about it? Like the things that are just they're black and white, hand it off. The things that are really gray and fuzzy, you still continue to handle until they're black and white.
Yeah, I don't know if that was intentional. I definitely see your point here, though, that it is that way. Yeah, I guess it's just sort of. I mean, some of that stuff, like the accounting stuff, was never a strong point of mine. It's not something that I necessarily enjoy, and though extraordinarily necessary and important to the business, right? So
Yeah.
that was definitely something that I needed to offload off mine. The building, yeah, it's that's it. That was always sort of the goal, was to kind of grow the company to a couple crews, 4 crews, get up there. But we've always sort of seen the 2 steps forward, 1 step back, and working our way up to that. But it's yeah, the I guess it sort of is that it is really easy to just sort of say, like, look, like, this is how this is done, have at it, sort of thing. Where all this other stuff, you're absolutely right. There's a lot of gray area. And one thing that I didn't mention that I still very much wear the hat, that is definitely gray area as well, is the marketing of the business too, right? So that's a whole other, lots of gray. That's it's very experimental too. Always learning.
Well, yeah, for sure. And it's normal too. I think, especially for someone who's trying to grow their company, if you're going to keep growing, what got you here isn't what's going to get you there. Therefore, you need to experiment. You need to try new things. That's on the marketing side. That's on the sales side too. You try things in sales too. Even just things like raising your prices. They may seem like a very like, okay, well, let's do the math and that's the number. And if I want to make more, well, then I'll raise the price. You're experimenting. You don't know what the reaction is from the market, from your clients and all that, right?
Yeah, no, absolutely. I'm always kind of tinkering with the numbers and, making sure that it's always going to be profitable. And that's nice about having the numbers behind you on the accounting, is you can look and see if it was or not. But
That's it.
yeah, no, it's getting it. It's very interesting, all that, basically, to see kind of how it all goes around.
Yeah. But that's what makes business fun, is all those different problems, all those different challenges. Analyzing the situation with as much data and experience as you can. And where you don't have hard data, you need to go get feedback from people. And that's another benefit, coming back to the leadership conversation, of building a strong leadership environment within your company and having a team of leaders. Because the more that they lead, the more that they assume ownership and responsibility for all of the things that they're involved with, the more that they are in a position to think about them more. And when you ask for feedback, you can get something that's a little more thoughtful, because they're thinking about it as they're doing it, because you've empowered them to do it. And it even not probably, I know it does. It leads to more proactive feedback too, where they could tell you, like, hey, you may or may not be aware of this. You may be looking at this or not right now, but I'm telling you that we can do this much better if we were able to do this instead. Whether it be a tool or whether, like, ideally, if we had another person, we could do this. We could set up where an excavation crew comes in and does this part, and then we can just handle the hardscaping. And by my math, we'd be saving, an extra 5% on our production. So we'd be getting the jobs done that much faster. When you start having members of your team coming at you with those suggestions, man, like, it gets a lot easier, because you're not solving all the problems anymore. Your team is helping you solve those problems, and you're doing it together, which is way more fun.
Oh yeah, you can't help but smile at a person that comes to you with an idea that's going to make you both richer, right?
That's it.
I love that.
That's it. Matt, I'm looking at the time. We've done about 45 minutes here. It always goes super fast. We didn't talk about the 3 C's. Do you want to talk about that real quick? Just kind of tease that out. Is that from the same book?
Yeah, that's from that book, and actually a lot more of the core concept of it than that laddership one. The laddership one is sort of a supplementary kind of tool that works with his website from it. But the 3 C's being that confidence, control, and competency. It's like basically like, putting them in the position where they have the power to make decisions, right? And the big thing with that, actually, as described in that book, is pushing the authority to the information instead of the information to the authority. Excuse me. An example of that, of like what we've talked about, is that river stone, for example. Because the foreman didn't say, or I didn't say, if there's if there's stone dust in that river stone, you have to be very careful, blah blah blah. Whereas if that person, felt that they had that authority at that time to say, oh geez, I'm starting to pull this up and there's all this stone dust, it kind of looks really badly. Maybe I should do something different, right? So that's pushing that authority down there and saying, like, yes, you do have the power to do something different than exactly as you were told, right? As long as it's moving us towards that end goal where it's very important that the leader's intent is understood.
Mm-hmm.
But giving up that control through those tools, sort of thing. Well, giving that control to them, I mean to say. Um, and then obviously, giving them the confidence to be able to do that, which comes in with being able to coach them through the difficult process of figuring out what the heck should I be doing next without kind of saying, well, why can't you figure out what the heck you should be doing next, right?
Yeah.
Yeah, that's giving that confidence, that control, and then yeah.
And that's what builds the competency too, because they learn how to do different things because they identify like, oh, this thing needs to be done. Yeah. It makes a lot of sense when you put it that way. And again, like the example that you gave with the low voltage line for the lighting and the stone dust and the stone and all that, like it makes sense. Like if the goal, and this is where that communication, which I know is not part of the 3 C's, but like it's the base of everything. But that communication of like, what are we doing? If you just say like run the wire, they're going to run the wire because they don't know why we're running the wire. But like if we're saying, look, our goal is today we have run the wire, we've connected all the fixtures, we've positioned them properly, we've uplit all the plants, and we've covered everything up with, and we're reusing the existing river stone. All of a sudden, it's a lot clearer. Like if that starts at the beginning of the day, when you ask the question like, well, what do you see? What should we do next? What do you intend to do? It graduates very quickly into the later stages of that ladder where it's like, well, here's what I've done and here's what I'm doing now and here's what I'm going to do next. Because they've mapped it all out because you told them at the end of the day, this is what we want. And then they own it.
That spot in that ladder where they're hitting that I intend to, the last little spot before they're up in leader world, that I intend to is a powerful communication tool because it announces like they're not off on their own doing it. Mm-hmm. A team member, whether it's a leader or another team member, may pipe up and say, well, hey, maybe that doesn't make sense to do right now because I'm trying to get this done and that might overlap with that. So how about we do this? Right. So having people walk around, and this is something that we're still very actively working on, this I intend to, and really use that as a powerful tool instead of, well, what do you want me to do? Or, I think we should do this. Say, I intend to do this. It means that you've already stepped back. You've thought about what could be done. You've looked around.
Yeah.
You sort of see what you think to the best of your knowledge. Yeah. Then there's no shame if someone says, well, hey, maybe I have this other piece of information that you didn't know about that may affect that decision. Yeah. But you don't let sort of that problem where stuff overlaps or people step on toes trying to do one thing over another thing because of that open communication.
Yeah,
right?
That's key. I'm happy we hit this point because it's like a ladder. Well, I mean, I'll just tell you, like in my head, like if you say here's the ladder, my goal is to get to the top. Like I'm a competitive person and I want to win. So like automatically my thing was like, well, we got to get people up the ladder as quickly as possible. But that's not the goal. The goal is to get them to progress up the ladder at their pace, at the pace that is right for them. And that's a key thing. That intent to a bit of communication is critical. Like you just helped me understand that. How often does that communication happen? Like, are you like, is it something you're asking? Like, what do you intend to do next? Or is it something like every hour, a break, at lunch, at afternoon break? Like, how do you do it?
So as I said, that's something we're still trying to kind of implement a little bit right now. It doesn't happen nearly as much as I would like, but maybe that's a good point for the meeting tomorrow morning, sort of thing. Well,
it's good though. But it's a work in progress, and even if it's in a book and they map it out like exactly, that doesn't necessarily mean that that's what's going to work for you and your company and your team. So you do need to be able to tinker and adapt and figure it out. But creating those communication opportunities is something that I, at least personally, that I have learned you need to make time for. And I'm the first one to admit that I'm very much guilty of not making enough time for it. And that you only really enforce that lesson when you have those opportunities, when you are getting that feedback or having that communication. Then you're like, wow, that was really useful. That was really good. I'm really glad we did it. And then you find yourself kicking yourself like, why don't we do this more often? And it's if there's one piece of advice I can give, honestly, everything you said is amazing. I learned as much in this episode as I'm sure you did in that book. But if there's one thing that I could share with you is create the opportunities, create the environment that allows for that communication to happen more frequently. And I feel that would help, because just listening to you, like, too, every time, like, just you're trying to do it and across the team and people are saying, I intend to do this. And I'm like, whoa, before you do that, I think we should do this. That's what builds a stronger team, where everyone's looking out for everything, because everybody knows what we want at the end. And they're going to figure out the best way there. And when you can get a team doing that, well, all of a sudden, you're not doing a little bit of the project management. You're not doing any of the project management anymore. And now you're focusing on other business problems. And that's what takes your company to the next level again.
That's it. And that's basically how I ended up reading all these books over the years. Is every single time there's, what do I need to solve now?
Yeah.
Well, this seems like there might be some concepts in there I can take or use or build upon or whatever, right? So that's what makes
it the most fun. It's you solve a problem and it opens your eyes to a new problem, a bigger one.
Yeah. They keep getting bigger too.
How many years have you been running Hardscape Ottawa now?
This is year 7.
Year 7. Are you where you thought you would be when you started?
Oh, gee. It's, you know what, I almost jumped into this not knowing what to expect. I didn't realize where the industry would be at this stage whenever I started the company, for being completely honest. I didn't know that how big this outdoor living space thing would absolutely explode, right? So, in hindsight, I started the company a little bit more of just like, we're going to build your brick really, really, really well. Now we're very much transitioned to being a complete design, build, outdoor living space company that, through our team and through our trusted subcontractors, build, like, as soon as you get past the siding of your house, we'll take it from there. So it's, I guess I didn't expect to be here because I didn't know that here would exist. But it's been pretty cool kind of growing into this with the industry and with everybody else, right?
What's the next big challenge you're trying to solve, if I can ask that question?
Oh, jeez. Just getting it's really all just about people. That's all that I'm thinking about right now. It's just the people that work for us. I mean, like, we're in this point where we have this huge influx of work. Everybody in the industry is so busy. Like, the marketing is doing its job, the sales it's doing its job, everything is running perfectly. The only thing holding back from growth is people, right? We can kind of postulate all day about, like, if you go get this vacuum lifter and you go get this and you go get that, well, now you're going to be so much more efficient. Well, you still need someone who gives a crap what that looks like once it's put down to be operating that vacuum and to be operating that. And if we don't bring in the kids right now that, come push wheelbarrows for a little bit or whatever it is, even though we don't really push that many wheelbarrows, we are mostly automated. If we don't start bringing them in, really building those people up in the industry right now, there's not going to be anybody to run those machines whenever we do have the robots. And you're going to have more robots than people, and there won't be people to run those robots, and that's no good. So I'm very, while I'm a big proponent of all these pieces of equipment, like, absolutely, you still need someone to run. And so I'm just very focused on people, in the short term, and then what that also means in the longer term too.
Yeah, well, I think that's really smart. That is the greatest challenge that we have as an industry as a whole. And I think you hit the nail on the head. Like, you can have all the machines, all the tools, all the equipment, all the techniques, everything. If you don't have the right people, it doesn't matter. But one of the big benefits is the fact that all these tools and equipment and new techniques and new materials, they're diversifying, or at least they're giving us the opportunity to diversify the talent pool. It doesn't need to be a bunch of guys who work construction, they're athletes, they're weightlifters, they're big, strong dudes. Like, it doesn't need to be that anymore. And we can have men and women, we can have big and small. Everybody, if they have the right values, the right work ethic, they can be successful in the right company. And I think what you're focusing on being a better leader for your company and recognizing that the biggest key to the future success of your company is in the people and figuring out how to get the best people and how to give them the environment to have the most success and enjoy their time working as a hardscaper at Hardscape Ottawa. I think that's like I would agree with that. Like that's where your focus needs to be. Like you said, you're running a great company. Your marketing is great. Your sales are great. Your designs are great. The revenue's coming in. Your customers are thrilled. Focus on building a better team. Not that your team's not good, but there's always room for improvement. You know, you can always get.
Yeah, no, that's things can always be improved on without looking at it as it's
That's right.
broken. You know, you can tinker with things that are not completely broken down, and that's kind of the nice thing about that. You don't have to look at it and go, well, this is trash, so I just need to rebuild it. It's like, well, you know, this is awesome, but how can I make it better? How can I make it better? How can I make it better? Which is, you know, we took that into, you know, how do we build these landscapes too, right? It's kind of everything. That's you know, if you're looking at things like that all the time in your life, you'd be successful one way or another.
Sure. I would agree. All right, we covered a lot of ground, man. Is there anything you want to add?
Yeah. Oh, jeez. I mean, I've spewed out more than I thought I would already. So.
Well, it's always fun talking with you, Matt. I know that, like I said, we exchange a lot of messages on Instagram too, and it's cool. It's cool for me. In all honesty, it's cool for me to see the evolution of your company and the evolution of you as a business person too. The things that you're improving on, the things that you're learning, and we talk often, and often you're talking about a challenge that you're facing, and every time we talk, it's a much more complicated problem than the last time. So that means the business is progressing, and so are you. So honestly, I'm proud having met you then when you were getting started and seeing where you are now. Like, good job, man. I'm proud of you. Congratulations.
Yeah, thank you. Appreciate
All right. Well, I guess that's it for this week's episode, guys. Matt, thank you very much for joining us. That's at Hardscape Ottawa on Instagram. That's still the best way to reach you if people want to shoot you a message.
Yeah, absolutely. And please don't hesitate to reach out if you want some recommendations for your bookshelf too.
Absolutely. And you know what? Let's do this. When this episode comes out, which will be in middle to late August, when this one comes out, we'll make sure we tag you, and you make sure that you post or put in your story a picture of your bookshelf. Let's do that.
We can do that.
All right. Okay. So thanks a lot for joining us once again. And until next week, everybody, work hard, pave harder. This has been the Hardscape Growth Show.